I stood frozen in the kitchen, my hand still hovering over the cabinet. The sting on my wrist burned like fire. Amber, my daughter-in-law, glared at me with pure hatred. "Hey, old woman, who gave you permission to do that?" she screamed, her voice echoing through the house. I looked at my son Todd, waiting for him to say something. Anything. But he just stared at his phone, pretending I didn't exist. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. By morning, they would see. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as I finished loading the last box into my car. My hands shook as I placed the envelope on the dining room table, right in the center where they couldn't miss it. Around it, I had stacked 8 moving boxes, neatly labeled with my belongings. It was 5:30 in the morning, and the house was still quiet. I took one last look at the home where I had lived for the past 2 years, ever since my Frank passed away. Todd had insisted I move in with them after the funeral. "You shouldn't be alone, Mom," he had said, holding my hand at the cemetery. At the time, I thought it was love. Now I knew better. The slap still burned in my memory. It had happened just 12 hours earlier, around dinner time. I had been trying to help, that's all. Amber's china cabinet in the formal dining room had looked so dusty, the expensive plates and crystal glasses covered in a thin gray film. She worked long hours at her marketing firm and never seemed to have time for housework. I thought I was doing something kind. I had spent 3 hours carefully removing each piece, washing them by hand in warm, soapy water, drying them with soft towels, and reorganizing them by size and color. The cabinet looked beautiful when I finished, the crystals sparkling in the afternoon light. That's when Amber came home. She walked into the dining room, saw me closing the cabinet door, and her face turned purple with rage. "What are you doing?" she hissed, rushing over. "I cleaned your china cabinet," I said, smiling, expecting gratitude. "It was so dusty, and I know how busy you are, so I thought I would help." Her hand flew up and smacked my wrist so hard I gasped. "Hey, old woman, who gave you permission to do that?" she screamed, inches from my face. "These are my things. This is my house. You don't touch anything without asking me first." I stood there, stunned, cradling my wrist. The skin was already turning red where she had struck me. I looked past her to where Todd stood in the doorway, his briefcase still in his hand, his eyes on his phone screen. "Todd," I whispered, "did you see what she just did?" He glanced up for half a second, then back down. "Mom, you really shouldn't go through other people's things," he muttered. Then he walked away, heading upstairs to change out of his work clothes. Amber smiled at me then, a cold smile that made my blood freeze. "You're here because we allow it," she said quietly. "Don't forget that." That night, lying in the small guest room they had given me, I couldn't sleep. My wrist throbbed. But worse than the physical pain was the realization that had been growing in my mind for months. I wasn't wanted here. I was tolerated. Or maybe not even that. I thought about Frank, my husband of 42 years. He had died suddenly of a heart attack while gardening, 2 years and 3 months ago. The grief had nearly destroyed me. Todd was our only child, and when he offered to let me live with him and Amber, it felt like a lifeline. But Frank had never trusted Amber. "There's something off about that girl," he had told me once, before they got married. "She's too interested in what we have, not who Todd is." I had dismissed his concerns, thinking he was just being overprotective. I should have listened. At 3 in the morning, I got up and started packing. I worked quietly, systematically, taking only what was truly mine. Clothes, photos, my mother's jewelry box, Frank's watch, some books. I left behind anything Todd and Amber had given me. Then I sat down and wrote the letter. "Dear Todd and Amber," it began. "By the time you read this, I will be gone. I have found a small apartment across town. The address is at the bottom of this letter. I paid the first and last month's rent with money from my savings account. Thank you for letting me stay these past 2 years. I thought I was helping, but I see now that I have been a burden. I will always love you, Todd. I hope someday you will understand why I had to leave. Love, Mom." I called a taxi at 4:30 in the morning. The driver helped me load the boxes into his trunk. As we pulled away from the house, I didn't look back. My new apartment was small, just one bedroom in a building full of other seniors. But it was mine. I spent the morning unpacking, hanging Frank's picture on the wall, setting my mother's jewelry box on the dresser. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. Meanwhile, across town, Todd and Amber were waking up. I imagined them coming downstairs, expecting to smell coffee and breakfast like every other morning. Instead, they found the dining room table covered in boxes and a white envelope with their names on it. I learned later what happened next from Todd's angry voicemail. Amber had grabbed the letter, ripped it open, and read it aloud. When she finished, she had actually laughed. "Good riddance," she said. "Now we can finally use that guest room for something useful. I'm thinking a home gym." Todd, to his credit, looked upset. "Mom's really gone?" he said, picking up the letter to read it himself. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Amber snapped. "She's being ridiculous. She'll be back in a week when she realizes how expensive it is to live alone." But Todd called me anyway. His voicemail said, "Mom, you're being dramatic. Amber didn't mean anything by it. She was just stressed from work. Come home. We can talk about this." I didn't call him back. I made myself a cup of tea, sat in my tiny living room, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It lasted exactly 3 days. On Thursday morning, I walked to the grocery store 3 blocks from my apartment. I had made a list. Bread, milk, eggs, chicken, vegetables. Simple things. I was actually excited about cooking for myself again, choosing what I wanted to eat instead of adapting to Amber's restrictive diet plans. At the checkout counter, I handed the cashier my debit card. She swiped it once, then twice, then looked at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your card is being declined. Do you have another form of payment?" My face burned with embarrassment. "That's impossible," I said. "Can you try it again?" She tried 3 more times. Each time, the machine beeped angrily. "Declined. Declined. Declined." The people behind me in line were getting impatient. I fumbled in my purse for cash, but I only had $17. My groceries came to $43.12. "I'll just take the milk and bread," I told her, my voice shaking. I practically ran out of the store, my face hot with shame. Something was very wrong. I had over $70,000 in that account, my life savings. The money Frank and I had carefully put away over decades. There was no reason for the card to decline. I went straight to the bank, walking the 8 blocks because I was too flustered to wait for the bus. My feet hurt by the time I got there, but I pushed through the heavy glass doors with determination. The bank was busy, full of people on their lunch breaks. I waited in line for 20 minutes, my anxiety building with each passing second. Finally, I reached the counter. "I need to check my account balance," I told the teller, a young woman with kind eyes. My card was declined at the store, but that shouldn't be possible. She typed on her computer, her brow furrowing. "Let me get the manager for you, Mrs. Williams," she said softly. The manager, Mr. Patterson, was a man in his 50s who had helped Frank and me open our savings account 15 years ago. He recognized me immediately, and his expression turned somber. "Mrs. Williams, please come to my office," he said. I followed him, my heart pounding. He closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "Sherry," he said gently, using my first name, "your accounts have been frozen." "Frozen?" I repeated. "What does that mean? By who?" He turned his computer screen toward me. "Your son Todd has power of attorney over your finances. He froze the accounts on Monday, citing concerns about your mental competency and ability to manage money safely." The room started spinning. "What power of attorney?" I whispered. "I never signed anything like that." Mr. Patterson pulled up a document on his screen. "According to our records, you signed this form 2 months ago, granting Todd Williams full financial power of attorney." He printed it out and handed it to me. I stared at the paper, at the signature that looked like mine at the bottom. My hands started shaking so badly the paper rattled. But I don't remember, I said. Then a memory surfaced, hazy and incomplete. 2 months ago, right after Frank's birthday would have been, Amber had brought me a stack of papers. Just some insurance stuff we need you to sign, she had said breezily. Routine paperwork from Frank's life insurance policy. Todd needs your signature to finalize everything. I had been in the kitchen making dinner. Amber had placed the papers on the counter, handed me a pen, and pointed to several places marked with colored tabs. Sign here and here and here, she had instructed. I had trusted her. She was family. I had signed without reading the documents carefully, assuming it was exactly what she said it was. Oh, God, I whispered now, staring at Mr. Patterson. I signed it, but I didn't know what it was. She told me it was insurance paperwork. Mr. Patterson's face was sympathetic but professional. I'm very sorry, Sherry, but there's something else you need to know. He pulled up another screen. On Tuesday, 3 days ago, Todd authorized a transfer of $73,500 from your savings account. The notation says it was for residential care expenses. I stopped breathing. $73,000? But I just moved into my own apartment. I'm not in residential care. Where did the money go? It was transferred to an account in Todd Williams's name. The room really was spinning now. I gripped the arms of the chair to steady myself. But that's my money, mine and Frank's. We saved for 40 years. That money was supposed to last me the rest of my life. I understand, and I'm deeply sorry. But legally, with the power of attorney, Todd has the authority to manage your finances as he sees fit. The bank's hands are tied. Can I cancel it? The power of attorney? Mr. Patterson's expression grew even more troubled. That's complicated. If Todd is claiming you're mentally incompetent, you would need to prove in court that you're capable of managing your own affairs. That requires a lawyer. How much money do I have left? I asked, dreading the answer. He checked the screen. In your checking account, you have $347. Your savings account now has $1,900. The rest was transferred. I had walked into this bank with $75,000 in combined accounts. I was walking out with barely over $2,000. My rent check, I gasped. I wrote a check for my first and last month's rent. $2,400. It's going to bounce. I'm afraid so, Mr. Patterson said quietly. The account was frozen before the check could clear. The landlord will likely evict you. I sat there in his office, stunned into silence. This couldn't be happening. This was my son, my boy, the child I had carried, raised, loved unconditionally for 38 years. I need to see Todd, I said, standing up too quickly. The room tilted and Mr. Patterson reached out to steady me. Are you all right? Can I call someone for you? I'm fine, I lied. I need to go. I left the bank in a daze. I tried calling Todd 17 times on my walk back to the apartment. Each call went straight to voicemail. He had blocked my number. I took the bus to his house. My house. The place where I had lived just days ago. I rang the doorbell. I could hear movement inside. Voices. Amber opened the door. She was wearing expensive yoga clothes and holding a green smoothie. Her smile was saccharine sweet. Sherry, she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. What a surprise. I need to talk to Todd, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, he's at work. But I'll definitely tell him you stopped by. Amber, my bank accounts are frozen. $73,000 is missing. I need Todd to fix this right now. Amber's smile never wavered. Oh, sweetie, I think you're confused. Todd has been managing your finances to help you. You know, at your age, it's easy to get mixed up about money. Maybe you should see a doctor about your memory. My memory is fine, I said sharply. I want my money back. That's theft. Theft? Amber laughed, a tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. Sherry, honey, Todd is your son. He's your power of attorney. He's legally responsible for your care. That money is being used to make sure you're taken care of properly. I don't need to be taken care of. I need my money so I can pay my rent. Amber took a sip of her smoothie, studying me over the rim of her cup. You know what I think? I think you're not well. Moving out suddenly, making wild accusations, this paranoia about money. These are all signs of cognitive decline. Todd and I have been very worried about you. Let me talk to Todd, I demanded. He'll call you when he has time, Amber said. Then she stepped back and closed the door in my face. I stood on the porch, staring at the closed door, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. That evening, my landlord called. The rent check had bounced. I had 30 days to pay in full, or I would be evicted. I had nowhere to go and no money to get there. The legal papers arrived by certified mail 7 days after the bank incident. I had to sign for them, my hand trembling as I took the thick envelope from the postal worker. Inside was a petition from Todd Williams requesting full legal guardianship over Sherry Ann Williams, age 67, on the grounds of mental incapacity. I read the document 3 times, each reading making me feel sicker than the last. The petition claimed I had early-onset dementia with significant cognitive impairment. It stated I had made irrational decisions, including abandoning family support without cause. It described financial confusion and inability to manage basic monetary affairs. It listed erratic behavior, including paranoid accusations against family members. Every single claim was a twisted version of the truth. Yes, I had left their house, but it wasn't irrational. It was self-preservation. Yes, I had questioned the missing money, but that wasn't paranoia. It was reality. At the bottom of the petition was a court date, 12 days away. A hearing before Judge Marion Morrison at the county courthouse. I called every lawyer in the phone book, 37 different law offices. The conversation was always the same. This is an elder law case. It requires a retainer of $5,000 to $10,000. I don't have that kind of money. I'm sorry, we can't help you. I tried legal aid. The receptionist was sympathetic but firm. Our waiting list for family law cases is currently 6 months. We're severely understaffed. I have a hearing in 12 days, I pleaded. You can represent yourself. The judge will take that into consideration. Represent myself. Against a lawyer Todd and Amber had surely hired with my own money. The day of the hearing arrived too quickly. I put on my best dress, the navy blue one I had worn to Frank's funeral. I arrived at the courthouse an hour early and sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, watching lawyers and families stream past me. At 9:30, Todd arrived. He wouldn't look at me. He was wearing a dark suit and looked thin, like he hadn't been sleeping well. Good, I thought bitterly. Behind him came Amber, dressed in a conservative black dress and pearls, looking like the perfect concerned daughter-in-law, and beside her was their lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s carrying a leather briefcase. All rise, the bailiff called. The Honorable Judge Marion Morrison presiding. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. She looked at the papers before her, then up at us. This is a petition for guardianship of Sherry Ann Williams, she said. Mrs. Williams, I see you don't have legal representation. Do you understand the proceedings today? I stood up. Yes, Your Honor. My son is trying to take away my rights, and I'm here to tell you I don't need a guardian. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. We'll hear testimony and make that determination, Judge Morrison said. Mrs. Caldwell, you may call your first witness. Mrs. Caldwell, Todd and Amber's attorney, stood up smoothly. Your Honor, I call Amber Williams to the stand. Amber walked to the witness stand like she was walking down a red carpet, poised and confident. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Mrs. Caldwell began gently. Mrs. Williams, can you describe your relationship with your mother-in-law? I love Sherry very much, Amber said, her voice catching. When she lost Frank, my father-in-law, we immediately invited her to live with us. We wanted to support her through her grief. Lies. All lies. And during the 2 years she lived with you, did you notice any changes in her behavior? Yes, Amber said. and now tears were actually rolling down her cheeks. Where had those come from? It started slowly. She would forget conversations we'd just had. She'd wander around the house at night, confused about where she was. Sometimes she wouldn't eat for days because she forgot to. We were very worried. Did there come a time when this behavior escalated? Yes. About 2 months ago, she started becoming paranoid. She accused us of stealing from her, of plotting against her. Then one day, she just left, packed her things in the middle of the night, and disappeared. We were terrified something would happen to her. I wanted to scream. Every word was a distortion, a manipulation. And what happened when you tried to help her financially? We discovered she had been trying to withdraw large sums of money. She wanted to give it to a telemarketer who had called her, claiming to be from the IRS. We had to step in to protect her. That was completely fabricated. I had never received such a call. Never tried to withdraw money for any scammer. "Thank you, Mrs. Williams," Mrs. Caldwell said. "No further questions." Judge Morrison looked at me. "Mrs. Williams, would you like to cross-examine this witness?" I stood up, my legs shaking. "Amber, you're lying. I never gave money to any scammer. I never wandered at night. You're making this all up because you want my money." "Sherry, honey," Amber said with devastating gentleness, "I understand you don't remember these things. That's exactly why we're here, to help you." I tried to ask more questions, but they all came out wrong, emotional and disorganized. I wasn't a lawyer. I didn't know how to do this. Finally, Judge Morrison stopped me. "Mrs. Williams, please sit down. Mrs. Caldwell, call your next witness." I call Todd Williams. My son walked to the stand like he was walking to his own execution. He still wouldn't look at me. "Mr. Williams, this must be very difficult for you," Mrs. Caldwell said sympathetically. "It is," Todd whispered. "Can you tell the court about your mother's recent behavior?" Todd cleared his throat. "She's not the same person anymore. My mom used to be sharp, organized, capable. But after my dad died, something changed. She became forgetful, confused. I'm worried she's going to hurt herself. Do you believe your mother needs a guardian?" A long pause. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Yes." Something inside me broke. Mrs. Caldwell produced more documents. "Your Honor, we have a letter here from Dr. Raymond Harrison, the family physician who has treated Mrs. Williams for 15 years. He states in this letter that he has observed signs of cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia." I remembered Dr. Harrison. He had been Frank's doctor too, but I hadn't seen him in over a year, not since a routine checkup right after Frank died. How could he make that determination? Judge Morrison read the letter, her expression unreadable. "Your Honor," I said desperately, standing up again. "I haven't seen Dr. Harrison in over a year. I don't have dementia. Please, you have to believe me." Judge Morrison looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Mrs. Williams, I can see you're upset, but I have serious concerns based on the testimony I've heard today. However, I'm not comfortable making a final ruling without more information. I'm ordering a court-appointed psychological evaluation. Dr. Patricia Reynolds will conduct a comprehensive assessment. We'll reconvene in 30 days to review her findings." "But, Your Honor," I started. "That's my ruling, Mrs. Williams. In the meantime, given the concerns raised today about your living situation, I'm ordering that you return to your son's home temporarily. This is for your own safety, until we can make a final determination." "No," I said. "Please, no." But the bailiff was already handing me papers with the temporary order. I had to move back in with Todd and Amber. Immediately. That night, I sat in the same guest room I had escaped from 2 weeks earlier. But this time, the door had no lock. Amber had removed it while I was unpacking, smiling sweetly as she explained it was for my safety in case I fell and needed help. I was a prisoner in my son's house. And the worst part? I could hear them downstairs, Amber's laugh ringing through the house as she celebrated her victory. Dr. Patricia Reynolds arrived on a Thursday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the hearing. She was a thin woman in her early 40s, with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and glasses that she kept pushing up her nose. She carried a leather bag full of papers and forms. Amber greeted her at the door like they were old friends. "Dr. Reynolds, thank you so much for coming. We're just devastated about Sherry's condition. It's been so hard watching her decline." They spent 10 minutes chatting in the living room before Amber finally came to get me from the guest room. "Sherry, the psychologist is here to evaluate you," she said brightly. "I made your favorite breakfast this morning, blueberry pancakes. Did you eat it?" I stared at her. She hadn't made me anything. I had made myself toast an hour ago. But when we got downstairs, there was indeed a plate of blueberry pancakes on the kitchen table, clearly just made. The plate was still warm. "I don't remember eating those," I said, confused. Amber and Dr. Reynolds exchanged a significant look. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Amber had crushed 2 of her sleeping pills into my orange juice at breakfast. I had drunk it without thinking, and now, an hour later, the medication was making me foggy and slow. Dr. Reynolds sat me down at the dining room table. "Now, Sherry, I'm going to ask you some questions. Just answer as best you can, all right?" "Okay," I said. My tongue felt thick. "What year is it?" I opened my mouth. I knew this. Of course I knew this. But the number wouldn't come. 2000 and. I trailed off. Was it 22? 23? Why couldn't I remember? "That's all right," Dr. Reynolds said, making a note. "What did you have for breakfast this morning?" I looked at the pancakes. I had eaten toast. But the pancakes were right there, and Amber said I ate them. Had I? I think. Pancakes? You think or you know? I'm not sure. More notes. "Can you count backwards from 100 by 7s? I tried. I really tried. But my brain felt like it was moving through mud. 100, 93, 80. I lost track. "I'm sorry, I'm very tired today." "What's your son's phone number?" I knew that. I had called it 1,000 times, but when I tried to recite it, the numbers came out wrong. I heard myself say it and knew it was incorrect, but I couldn't fix it. The evaluation went on for 90 minutes. Every question felt like a trap. Every answer I gave felt wrong the moment it left my mouth. I could see Dr. Reynolds writing more and more notes, her expression growing more concerned. "One last thing," Dr. Reynolds said. "I'm going to show you 3 objects. I want you to remember them. I'll ask you to recall them in a few minutes." She placed 3 things on the table: a pen, a key, and an apple. "Got it?" "Yes," I said. She asked me more questions. About my childhood. About Frank. About my feelings. My answers were slow and disjointed. I couldn't focus. Then she said, "Now, can you tell me the 3 objects I showed you?" I stared at the table. There had been objects. I remembered that. But what were they? "A pen," I said slowly, and nothing. My mind was blank. "It's all right," Dr. Reynolds said gently. But her eyes said something different. After she left, I went to my room and slept for 4 hours. When I woke up, my head was clearer. I felt normal again. And then I realized what had happened. The orange juice. Amber had drugged me, but it was too late. The evaluation was done. 4 days later, I received a copy of Dr. Reynolds's report. It was devastating. Patient demonstrates significant cognitive impairment consistent with moderate dementia, short-term memory deficits, confusion regarding time and place, inability to perform simple mathematical tasks. Recommendation: patient requires supervised care in a memory care facility. 2 days after that, Judge Morrison issued her ruling. Todd was granted temporary guardianship, and I was to be placed in Meadowbrook Memory Care Facility for my own safety and well-being. The transport van came on a Monday morning. 2 people in scrubs, smiling but firm. Amber had already packed my things, 1 small suitcase of clothes. "Where's Todd?" I asked as they led me to the van. "At work, honey," Amber said. "He said goodbye this morning. Don't you remember?" He hadn't. He hadn't said anything to me in weeks. Meadowbrook Memory Care Facility was a low, sprawling building on the edge of town. The lobby tried to look cheerful with fake plants and paintings of flowers, but underneath the air freshener, the place smelled of disinfectant, urine, and despair. The director, a tired-looking woman named Miss Patterson, processed my admission papers. "Sherry will be in the shared room in the East Wing," she told the transport workers. Room 117. Room 117 had 4 beds crammed into a space meant for 2. 3 other women lived there, all in various stages of dementia. One sat in a wheelchair by the window, staring at nothing. Another paced constantly, muttering to herself. The third was in bed, curled up like a child. My bed was in the corner, furthest from the window. A nurse came in, a young man named Kevin. "Time for your medications, Sherry," he said cheerfully. "I don't take any medications," I said. He checked his chart. "It says here you're on Risperdal and Ativan, doctor's orders." "What are those for?" "They'll help keep you calm and comfortable." "I don't need to be calm. I need to get out of here." Kevin's smile never wavered, but his voice got firmer. "Now, Sherry, let's not make this difficult. Open up." I tried to refuse, but another nurse appeared, a large woman named Sandra. Between the two of them, they made it clear I didn't have a choice. The medications made me sleepy and numb. The world took on a fuzzy quality, like I was watching everything through fog. Days blurred together. Breakfast in the common room at 7, medications at 8, group activities at 10, though I usually just sat and watched the others try to remember how to throw a beach ball. Lunch at noon, more medications. Dinner at 5, medications again, bed by 8. Todd came to visit once, 3 weeks after I arrived. He stood in the doorway of my room, looking anywhere but at me. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Todd, please," I said, standing up from my bed. "You have to get me out of here. I don't belong here. I don't have dementia." "The doctors say you do, Mom." "The doctors are wrong. Amber drugged me before that evaluation. She put something in my orange juice." He flinched. "Mom, don't. Please don't make this harder than it is." "Hard for who?" I demanded. "I'm the one locked up in here like a prisoner." "Todd, I'm your mother. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "You need care, Mom. Professional care. I can't give you that." "I don't need care." My voice rose, and a nurse appeared in the doorway, alert. "Everything okay in here?" she asked. "I think my mom is getting agitated," Todd said. "Maybe I should go." "No, don't go." I grabbed his arm. "Please, Todd, please." But he pulled away, and the nurse stepped between us. "Sherry, let's calm down. Mr. Williams, maybe it's best if you leave. Sometimes visits can be upsetting." And just like that, my son walked out. Amber never visited once. One afternoon, about a month into my stay, I overheard 2 nurses talking outside my room. They didn't know I was awake. "That new lady, Sherry Williams, she doesn't seem like the others," one said. "She's totally with it." "I know," the other replied. "But the family says she has dementia. And the paperwork checks out. Sometimes it's hard to tell in the early stages." "Did you see the house sale notice in her file? The daughter-in-law already sold her house. Got $400,000 for it." My blood turned to ice. $400,000. That was what Frank and I had paid for that house 30 years ago. In today's market, it was worth at least that, maybe more. The house Frank built. The home where we raised Todd, where we celebrated every holiday, where Frank had kissed me goodbye on the morning he died. Gone. And with it, all my possessions. My mother's antique furniture. My photo albums. Frank's workshop tools. Our wedding china. Everything we had accumulated over a lifetime. All of it gone. Sold, dispersed, stolen. That night, I lay in my narrow bed listening to my roommates snore and mutter in their sleep, and I felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Not despair, not fear. Rage. Pure white-hot rage. Amber had taken everything from me. My money, my home, my freedom, my dignity. She had manipulated my son, deceived the courts, and locked me away where no one would listen to me. But she had made one mistake. She had assumed I would give up. Dorothy came into my life on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. She was 72 years old, with wild gray curls, paint-stained hands, and the most intelligent eyes I had ever seen. She ran the art therapy program at Meadowbrook, volunteering twice a week to teach watercolor painting to residents. Most of them couldn't hold a brush properly anymore, but Dorothy had endless patience, guiding their trembling hands and praising every crooked line. I had been at Meadowbrook for 6 weeks by then. I had learned to hide my pills under my tongue and spit them out later. It took 3 days for my head to clear completely, and another 4 for my body to feel normal again. The staff noticed I was less compliant, but they couldn't force me to take medications if I was clever about pretending. Dorothy noticed me immediately. "You're different from the others," she said during her first session, pulling up a chair next to where I, Saturday. "What's your name?" "Sherry Williams." "Well, Sherry Williams, how do you feel about watercolors?" "I used to paint with my daughter's 4th grade class," I said. "I was a teacher for 33 years. Her eyebrows rose. "A teacher? And yet you're here." Something in her tone made me look up. There was no pity in her eyes, only sharp assessment. Over the next 2 weeks, Dorothy and I talked during every art session. I told her everything. The slap, the bank accounts, the forged power of attorney, the drug devaluation, the stolen house. Dorothy listened without interrupting, her hands moving steadily across her watercolor paper, creating a landscape of mountains and sky. When I finished, she set down her brush and looked at me directly. "Sherry, I'm a retired attorney. I practiced family and elder law for 40 years before I retired, and everything you just described to me is textbook elder abuse and fraud." Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time in weeks. "Can you help me?" "I can try, but I'm going to need to investigate first. Make sure I have the facts straight." "How?" "Let me worry about that. You just sit tight." Dorothy worked fast. She had connections, resources, and a lifetime of legal knowledge. Over the next 2 weeks, she compiled a case file that would have made any prosecutor proud. She discovered that the power of attorney document had been notarized by someone who wasn't even licensed in our state. The signature, when analyzed by a handwriting expert Dorothy knew, showed signs of forgery. The pressure points were wrong, the letter formation slightly off. She found bank records showing the exact date and time of the $73,000 transfer. It had been moved to Todd's personal account, not any kind of care fund or trust. She pulled property records showing the house sale. $412,000. The entire sum had been deposited into a joint account belonging to Todd and Amber. But the most damning evidence came from Dr. Harrison's office. Dorothy convinced a young nurse who worked there, someone who had been troubled by something she'd seen, to come forward. The nurse provided bank statements showing that Dr. Harrison had received a $20,000 consulting fee from Amber Williams, just days before he wrote the letter claiming I had dementia. A bribe. Dr. Harrison had been bribed. And then Dorothy found something that made even her gasp. She ran a background check on Amber. Her maiden name was Amber Judith Spencer. Before marrying Todd, she had been married once before, for 3 years, to a man named Gerald Hutchinson. Gerald's mother, Margaret Hutchinson, had died 3 years ago in a memory care facility across the state. Margaret had entered the facility at age 74, diagnosed with dementia. She died 6 months later of natural causes. Before her placement, Margaret had sold her house for $308,000. After her death, her entire estate went to Gerald, who then divorced Amber 3 months later. In the divorce, Amber received a settlement of $150,000. It was the exact same pattern, down to the details. The dementia diagnosis, the facility placement, the house sale, the mysterious death. "She's done this before," I whispered when Dorothy showed me the documents. "She killed that woman." "We don't know that for certain," Dorothy said carefully. "Margaret's death certificate says natural causes. But the pattern is clear. Amber targets widowed men with elderly mothers and significant assets. She marries the son, manipulates him, then systematically drains the mother's estate. Whether Margaret's death was natural or helped along, we'll probably never know. But your situation is absolutely fraud. So what do we do? Dorothy's expression turned grim. That's the problem. I'm not your lawyer. I'm not family. I have no legal standing to file motions on your behalf. You need to file this yourself. And to do that, you need to get out of here. How? I'm locked in. The doors have codes. The staff watches everyone. Leave that to me, Dorothy said. I have a plan, but it's risky. If we fail, things could get much worse for you. Worse than this? I gestured around at the depressing room, the confused woman muttering in the corner, the locked doors. Yes, Dorothy said seriously. If Amber finds out you're fighting back, she might escalate. Push for a permanent guardianship, maybe even a psychiatric commitment. You'd be transferred to a locked psychiatric ward. Those are much harder to escape from. I thought about that. Then I thought about Frank, about the house we built, about my dignity and my freedom. I'll take the risk, I said. Tell me the plan. The plan was simple but required perfect timing. On Thursday afternoons, the residents who were mobile enough went outside for a supervised activity in the courtyard. The staff was stretched thin, usually just 2 aides watching 12 to 15 residents. Dorothy's nephew, Gary, would be waiting in the parking lot in his car. When the moment was right, during the confusion of getting everyone back inside, I would simply walk to the parking lot instead of back to the building. Gary would drive me straight to the courthouse, where Dorothy would meet us with all the evidence. We would file an emergency motion to dissolve the guardianship and freeze all my assets before Amber could take anything more. Thursday arrived. My hands shook as I got dressed that morning. I wore my best clothes, the ones I would need for court. I packed nothing else. If this failed, I wouldn't get a second chance. At 2 o'clock, we went outside. 15 residents, 2 aides. I positioned myself near the edge of the group, close to the parking lot gate. I watched the clock on the building wall. 2:15, 2:30. At 2:45, Dorothy gave me the signal from inside the building, a thumbs up through the window. Now, I stood up from my bench and started walking. Not running. That would attract attention. Just walking, like I knew exactly where I was going. Sherry? Sherry, where are you going? One of the aides called. I kept walking. Sherry, stop! I reached the parking lot gate. It wasn't locked during the day. I pushed through. Behind me, I heard shouting. Someone get Sherry! She's leaving! I saw Gary's car, a blue sedan, exactly where he said it would be. He saw me and threw open the passenger door. I ran the last 20 feet and threw myself into the seat. Go, go. Gary hit the gas and we were moving, out of the parking lot, onto the street, away from Meadowbrook. I looked back and saw staff members running out of the building. One of them was already on her phone. They're calling the police, I said. I know, Gary said. Dorothy's ready for that. We just need to get you to the courthouse. We drove across town, my heart pounding the whole way. Every police car we passed made me flinch, but none of them stopped us. The courthouse was a granite building in the center of downtown. Dorothy was waiting on the steps, briefcase in hand. Come on, she said. We need to file this right now before. Before what? And then I saw them. Amber's black Mercedes, screeching into the parking lot. And behind it, 2 police cars, lights flashing. Amber jumped out of her car, her face a mask of concern and fear. There she is. Officers, that's my mother-in-law. She's confused. She has dementia. She escaped from her care facility. The police officers approached us. One of them, a young man with a sympathetic expression, said, Ma'am, are you Sherry Williams? Yes, I said. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. Your family is very worried about you. I'm not going anywhere with her, I said, pointing at Amber. She stole everything from me. She's a fraud and a thief. Sherry, honey, you're confused, Amber said. tears already streaming down her face. How did she do that? Cry on command? Please, let these nice officers help you. I'm not confused, I shouted. One of the officers reached for my arm. Ma'am, please don't make this difficult. Wait, Dorothy said, stepping forward. She pulled out her identification. Officers, I'm Dorothy Brennan, retired attorney. This woman is being financially exploited by her daughter-in-law. We have evidence of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. We're here to file an emergency motion. The officers looked uncertain now. This wasn't a simple situation of a confused elderly person. We still need to take her back to the facility, one officer said. She's under a guardianship order. A guardianship obtained through fraud, Dorothy countered. She opened her briefcase and pulled out documents. Look at this. Forged power of attorney, bribed doctor. $73,000 stolen. This woman doesn't have dementia. She was drugged before her psychological evaluation. More cars were arriving now, people were gathering. And then I saw him. Todd. He got out of his car and stood there, staring at all of us. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. His tie was crooked, his eyes red. Mom, he said. Todd, tell them, I pleaded. Tell them the truth. You know I don't have dementia. You know this is wrong. He stood there, frozen. Amber rushed over to him, grabbing his arm. Todd, honey, tell them your mother needs to go back to Meadowbrook. She's not well. But Todd was staring at something. Dorothy's open briefcase, papers spilling out, bank statements, property records. What is all that? He asked. Evidence, Dorothy said. Evidence that your wife has been systematically defrauding your mother. And evidence that she's done this before. Did you know Amber's first mother-in-law died in a facility after Amber drained her estate? Todd's face went white. What? It's not true, Amber shrieked. She's lying. Todd, don't listen to them. Your mother doesn't have dementia, Mr. Williams, Dorothy said firmly. She was drugged before her evaluation, by your wife, who used that false diagnosis to steal from her. Todd looked from Dorothy to me to Amber. Is this true? Of course not, Amber said. Your mother is sick. She's making all this up because she's confused. Todd, I said quietly, look at me. Really look at me. You've known me your entire life. Do I seem confused to you? Or do I seem like someone who's been telling the truth all along and nobody would listen? He looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in months. And I saw something shift in his expression. I need to see that evidence, he said to Dorothy. Todd, no. Amber grabbed his arm harder. We need to go home. Now. He shook her off. I said I need to see it. Dorothy handed him the file. He stood there on the courthouse steps, flipping through pages, bank statements, the forged signature analysis, the bribe to Dr. Harrison, the information about Margaret Hutchinson. His hands started shaking. Oh my God, he whispered. Oh my God, Mom. What did I do? Todd, don't be ridiculous, Amber said, but her voice had lost its sweetness. Now it was sharp, panicked. That's all fake. They made it all up. Todd reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a flash drive. I found this on your laptop, he said to Amber. I almost didn't look at it. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. But I looked. He turned to Dorothy and the police officers. There are emails on here. Between Amber and Dr. Reynolds, the psychologist who evaluated my mother. They were planning this. All of it. Dr. Reynolds is Amber's former college roommate. She agreed to declare my mother incompetent in exchange for $10,000. Amber's face transformed. The mask was gone. What remained was cold and calculating. You idiot, she hissed at Todd. We had everything. Your mother's money, her house, everything. And you're throwing it away because you feel guilty? You stole from my mother, Todd said, his voice breaking. You locked her up. You drugged her. And I helped you do it. One of the police officers stepped forward. Ma'am, I think you need to come with us. We have some questions. I'm not saying anything without my lawyer, Amber snapped. As the officers led Amber away, She turned back to look at me. The hatred in her eyes was pure and absolute. "This isn't over," she said. But it was. Judge Morrison granted an emergency hearing that afternoon. With Todd's testimony and Dorothy's evidence, the guardianship was immediately suspended. I was released from Meadowbrook that evening. The police arrested Amber 2 days later on charges of elder abuse, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and theft. I was free, but I had lost everything: my money, my home, my trust in my own son. And I had no idea how I would ever rebuild my life. The criminal trial began 4 months later, in late January. The courthouse was packed. Dorothy sat beside me every day, even though she wasn't officially my attorney anymore. I had hired a lawyer named Mr. Harrison, no relation to the bribed doctor, who specialized in elder abuse cases. He worked on contingency, meaning he would only get paid if we won the civil case we filed alongside the criminal proceedings. The prosecutor was a sharp woman in her 30s named Miss Richardson. She laid out the case methodically, piece by piece, building a timeline that showed exactly how Amber had orchestrated everything. The forged power of attorney. The bribed Dr. Harrison, who had surrendered his medical license and was under investigation himself. The conspiracy with Dr. Reynolds, who had also lost her license and was facing her own criminal charges. The transfer of $73,000. The house sale. The pattern with Margaret Hutchinson. Amber's defense attorney tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-family member making up stories, but the evidence was overwhelming. Todd testified for the prosecution. He looked 20 years older than he had 6 months ago. He sat in the witness box and admitted everything. How he had ignored the signs. How he had chosen Amber over his own mother. How he had signed documents without reading them, transferred money without questioning it, let his wife lock me away without fighting for me. "I was weak," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I loved my wife, and I believed her when she said my mom was sick. I wanted to believe her because the alternative was that I had married someone capable of this. I failed my mother in every possible way." Amber sat at the defense table, her face a frozen mask. She never testified. Her lawyer advised against it. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found her guilty on all 12 counts. At sentencing, Judge Morrison, the same judge who had granted the guardianship, looked at Amber with undisguised disgust. "Mrs. Williams, you systematically exploited a vulnerable elderly woman. You manipulated the legal system, bribed medical professionals, and destroyed a family for your own financial gain. The evidence suggests this is not the first time you've done this. The court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison." Amber showed no emotion as they led her away in handcuffs. But the criminal case was only half the battle. We still had the civil lawsuit. Mr. Harrison filed suit against Amber for the return of all stolen assets, plus damages for emotional distress, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. The case went to trial in March. This time, we didn't just go after Amber. We went after her assets, her accounts, everything she had purchased with my money. The court forensic accountant traced every dollar. The $73,000 from my savings account had been used to buy Amber's Mercedes, designer clothes, luxury vacations, jewelry. The $412,000 from the house sale was sitting in an investment account in both Amber's and Todd's names. Todd immediately agreed to return every penny. "It's not my money," he told the court. "It never was. It belongs to my mother." The jury in the civil trial awarded me $470,000. $73,000 from savings, $412,000 from the house, $35,000 in damages and lost earnings, and $50,000 in punitive damages for the sheer cruelty of what had been done to me. The judge ordered Amber's assets seized. Her car, her designer clothes, her jewelry, everything, all sold at auction. The proceeds went to me. And the house. The beautiful house Frank and I had built. The buyer, when contacted by my lawyer, was horrified to learn the story behind the sale. "I would never have bought this house if I'd known," he said. He was a young man, early 30s, who had bought it as a first home for his growing family. "Mrs. Williams, I'll sell it back to you at the price I paid. I don't feel right keeping it." By May, the legal proceedings were finally over. I had $470,000 back in my bank accounts, now protected with new passwords and security measures. I had my house back, and I had my freedom, but I didn't have my son. Not really. Todd had filed for divorce from Amber the day after her arrest. He moved into a small apartment across town. He called me once a week, asking if he could visit, and every time I said I wasn't ready. How could I forgive him? He had chosen her over me. He had let them lock me away. He had stood by while I was drugged and declared incompetent. But he had also, in the end, done the right thing. He had brought the evidence that set me free. He had testified against Amber. He had returned every dollar without being asked. Dorothy, wise Dorothy, told me one Tuesday over coffee, "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean what he did was okay. But holding on to anger will only hurt you, Sherry. Not him. You." In June, 6 months after my escape from Meadowbrook, Todd called again. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said. "I know I failed you, but I'm going to therapy. I'm trying to understand how I let this happen, and I want to make it right. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. Will you give me that chance?" I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "You can come over on Sunday. We'll have dinner. Just dinner. That's all I'm promising." Sunday came. Todd showed up with flowers. Frank's favorite kind. Yellow roses. He looked nervous. We ate dinner at the kitchen table, the conversation awkward and halting. But it was a start. Over the next months, slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild something. Not what we had before. That was gone forever. But something new. Something built on honesty instead of denial, on boundaries instead of blind trust. Todd came over every Sunday. He fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom. He repainted the guest room. He helped me organize Frank's old workshop, something I hadn't been able to face alone. He was earning his way back, one Sunday at a time. Thanksgiving morning, 18 months after the day Amber slapped my hand in the kitchen, I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, in my own life. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom window. I got up slowly, my joints stiff the way they always are these days, and walked to the window. The garden Frank had loved was overgrown, but I'd started working on it again. Yellow mums bloomed in the flower beds, and the maple tree blazed red and gold. I went downstairs and started preparing for dinner. For the first time in 2 years, I was hosting Thanksgiving. The dining room table, the same table where Amber had screamed at me, where I had left that goodbye letter, now gleamed with polish. I had set it the night before with my mother's china, the plates Amber had sold at the house sale but that Todd had tracked down and bought back for me. The doorbell rang at noon. Dorothy arrived first, carrying a pecan pie. "Happy Thanksgiving, dear," she said, hugging me. Walter came next, Frank's best friend, the man who had testified about Frank's wishes regarding the power of attorney. He brought wine and stories about Frank that made me laugh and cry. Gary, Dorothy's nephew, who had driven the getaway car, arrived with his wife and 2 small children. The kids ran through the house, filling it with noise and life. And then Todd arrived. He stood on the porch holding a covered dish, looking uncertain. "Hi, Mom." "Come in," I said. "You're letting the cold air in." He smiled, relieved, and stepped inside. We gathered around the table, this makeshift family of survivors and conspirators. As I looked around at their faces, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not just happiness, gratitude. Before we ate, I stood up. "I want to say something," I announced. Everyone quieted down. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I had lost Frank. I had lost my independence, and I was losing myself. I let someone take advantage of my grief and my trust. I signed papers without reading them. I ignored my instincts. I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I looked at each person around the table. But I also learned something. I learned that being kind doesn't mean being weak, that asking for help isn't giving up, that falling down isn't the end of the story if you're willing to get back up. My eyes landed on Todd. I learned about forgiveness, real forgiveness, which is hard and messy and takes time. It doesn't erase what happened, but it allows us to move forward anyway. Todd's eyes were wet. Most importantly, I continued, I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. At 67 years old, I discovered I still have fight in me. And now I'm using that strength to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to others. After Amber's trial, I had started volunteering at the senior center. I taught a class called Protecting Yourself, Financial Safety for Seniors. I showed people how to recognize the warning signs of financial abuse. I taught them about power of attorney documents and what questions to ask before signing anything. I shared my story, painful as it was, because if it helped even one person avoid my fate, it was worth it. I had also started working with the state legislature on a bill that would require more oversight for guardianship cases, mandatory second opinions for dementia diagnoses, and stricter penalties for those who exploit the elderly. So today, I said, raising my glass of water, I'm thankful. For Dorothy, who believed me when no one else would. For Gary, who risked helping a stranger. For Walter, who remembered Frank's wishes. For Todd, who found his courage when it mattered most. I paused, gathering my thoughts. And I'm thankful for myself, for not giving up, for fighting back, for surviving. To Sherry, Dorothy said, raising her glass. To Sherry, everyone echoed. We ate turkey and stuffing and sweet potatoes. We laughed and told stories. The children ran around the table, and Walter spilled gravy on the tablecloth, and everything was imperfect and wonderful. After dinner, as I was cleaning up in the kitchen, Todd came in to help. Mom, he said quietly, drying a dish. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make up for what I did. You can't make up for it, I said honestly. What's done is done. But you can learn from it. You can be better. You can help me teach others so they don't fall into the same trap. I want to do that, he said. Whatever you need. Then come to the senior center with me next Tuesday. Help me teach the class. Tell your story. It'll be hard, but it matters. He nodded. I'll be there. As the guests started leaving, each of them hugged me goodbye. Dorothy was the last to leave. You did good, Sherry, she said, holding my hands. You really did. After everyone was gone, I walked through the quiet house. I touched the walls Frank and I had painted together 30 years ago. I looked at the photos on the mantle, Frank and me on our wedding day, Todd as a baby, the three of us at the Grand Canyon. I thought about everything I had been through, the betrayal, the theft, the imprisonment, the fear, the long fight to get my life back. And I thought about what I had gained. Not just my money or my house, though those mattered, but something more valuable, my sense of self, my dignity, my power. I had discovered that true strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. It's about fighting for yourself even when everyone tells you you're confused or wrong or too old to matter. I had learned that your story isn't over until you decide it's over. That 67 years old doesn't mean powerless. That being a victim and being a survivor are two different things, and you get to choose which one you'll be. I settled into my favorite chair, Frank's old reading chair by the window, and looked out at the garden. Tomorrow I would get up and live my life. I would teach my class. I would have coffee with Dorothy. I would work in the garden. I would continue to be Sherry Williams, survivor, fighter, teacher. Today had been about gratitude. Tomorrow would be about purpose. And that, I thought, was a pretty good way to live. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt powerless in a situation where someone took advantage of your trust? Maybe it was a family member, a friend, or someone you thought had your best interests at heart. How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's going through something similar right now. If this story touched your heart or made you think about the elderly people in your own life, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these stories and learn from them. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. I share stories like this every week, stories about real people facing real challenges and finding the strength to overcome them. Please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone you know is being taken advantage of and doesn't realize it. Maybe someone needs to be reminded that they're stronger than they think. Or maybe someone just needs to know they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope you and your loved ones are safe, healthy, and standing strong. Remember, it's never too late to fight for yourself. It's never too late to take back your power. And it's never too late to start over. Take care of yourselves and each other. And I'll see you in the next story.